Good morning, my friends. How y'all doing? That's good, that's good. Hey, Becca, you want to do me a favor? Hand me a Bible? Oops. My bad. Thank you, Becca. Anybody else excited for this week? You know what's going to happen? Those political ads are going to stop. It is a good day. Man, it is so hard to have a good time when I'm watching like a happy YouTube video, and all of a sudden they're like, this person hates puppies, don't vote for them. Jeez. I was having such a good day. If you're joining us for the first time, or if you're wondering who I am, my name is Mark. Should have led with that. Good morning, my name is Mark. I'm a youth pastor and a fella. And we are going through 1 Samuel. And it has, in my opinion, it's been great. I'm a big fan of the Old Testament. And we're specifically going to be in 1 Samuel, I should know this, chapter 27. 1 Samuel chapter 27. But I'm going to start off with a personal story about myself. Try not to laugh. It's very personal. When I was in grade school, I had a bully. And his name was Jimmy. Which, oh no, you don't reveal that too soon. That's not Jimmy. But he was a new student, and man, I'm not going to lie, he was a pain. I won't lie, I was probably a prime suspect for a bully. We'll get it. So this was fourth grade Mark. Peep the calculator watch. I had it all together then. As I was thinking about fourth grade Mark, I was trying to think, what did I wear? What did I look like? And I was going through a phase, which I'm realizing I'm doing it exactly now, but I always tucked in my shirt. Like, no matter what shirt I was wearing, I tucked it in. And then I wore a hairstyle called the duck bill, which I don't know, I Googled that. I don't know if that's the wrong name for it, or I tried to invent something that didn't stick, but I would gel my hair all down, but then just right here have a little duck bill. That was the thing, right? Okay, 4 of you are like, yeah, that was the thing. And that is what I did every day. I had my shirt tucked in, had the duck bill, and so I'm no stranger to the fact I probably wasn't helping myself out. I was probably giving the bully a lot of material to work with, especially that calculator watch. But he picked on me in 4th and 5th grade. He was a new student, and when he came in, he really just made a ruckus. And he'd make fun of me, he would harass me, he would even push me a few times. It was nothing too serious, but it was enough to make school, at times, kind of difficult, or just not enjoyable. And remember, this time, and even especially into middle school, is really a time where you're trying to fit in. You don't want to stick out, you want to blend in. And Jimmy made me feel unwanted. Jimmy made me feel like I stuck out, that I wasn't a part of the group. And I grew up going to church, and I knew deep down that I needed to love Jimmy. I remember being taught to love your enemies, but at this point, I didn't want to. I remember vividly thinking, I don't want to love Jimmy. He was awful to me. Not only did I not want to love him or welcome him, but I wanted him to leave for good. I wanted him to be gone. And I had the same teacher as Jimmy for 2 years, 4th and 5th grade. And slowly over those 2 years, Jimmy began to represent everything that I hated. Whatever he did, I hated. Whatever it was. Didn't matter what it was, I hated it. He was a skater, so I hated skating. He wore jeans, and so I swore I would never wear jeans. And so for like 6 years of my life, I only wore shorts. I was that kid. I only wore shorts because Jimmy wore pants, so therefore I hate pants. He was the reason I didn't do good on that test. He was the reason for my bad attitude. He was the reason for forgetting to write notes. Jimmy was the reason for all of my troubles, even if he had no part in it. I, over time, very successfully made Jimmy the root of all of my problems, and I did a good job at it. Eventually, Jimmy and I were no longer in class together once we got to middle school. And as I continued to grow, I would look back at this interaction and I would think, well, I was a child then. That wouldn't happen anymore. I would grow out of that. But alas, I have found it to be a human thing. And it's something I have found myself to every once in a while fall back into. It seems it's human tendency to make someone or something the root of all of our problems. Whether it be traffic or one bad interaction or a bad boss, that thing starts representing everything that's wrong. That is the reason why X, Y, and Z aren't happening, or why my life isn't the way it should, is because of this thing or person. Which is similar, I believe, that the Israelites find themselves with the story of the Philistines. If you're unfamiliar with the Philistines, they are a character in the Old Testament. They're a people group. They moved in, and they were more advanced than the Israelites. They had better technology, and they often made war with the Israelites. And they were ancient Israel's arch nemesis. They were the big bully to the south. If you remember the last message I gave, which was a few weeks ago, I talked about the Ark of the Covenant. And at one point, they went to battle with the Philistines and they lost. They went back home, they grabbed the Ark of the Covenant, they went to battle again, and they lost again. And 30,000 of their men died. Throughout history of ancient Israel, they are the constant enemies. If you're familiar with the Old Testament, they continually come up. The Philistines, the Philistines, the Philistines. They are the representation of everything that is wrong for the Israelites. They do everything wrong. The Israelites would live in fear of the Philistines. And most likely, the Philistines would live in fear of the Israelites. And then we have a contrasting character that pops up. His name is David. So to recap, we have these Philistines and they're evil. They're bad. Everything they do is wrong. And then we have David. And David is literally described as a man after God's own heart. He, even now, is seen as one of the best guys in the Old Testament. He seems to be the most well-rounded person in the Bible. He was a poet. He was a warrior. He slayed Goliath. There's nothing that David can't do. This guy had it all and did amazing things for Israel. He was everything that was good in the world. And he came at the downfall of Saul, the first king of Israel. So we're in this dilemma now. We have the Philistines, these enemies to the south. We have King Saul, who is slowly declining. He's honestly kind of almost going crazy. He's jealous, he's angry, and he's trying to kill David as David is rising into his kinghood. So we have one going down, one coming up. So where we're going to pick up is David is fleeing from Saul. And this is in 1 Samuel chapter 27. We're going to look at verse 1. But David thought to himself, one of these days I will be destroyed by the hand of Saul. The best thing I can do is to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up searching for me anywhere in Israel, and I will slip out of his hand. I hope I painted that picture well, because this is crazy when you see it in context. The fact that David is seeking refuge with the Philistines would have been unheard of. It honestly may have even been frustrating, or maybe even got to the Israelites angry that he would have done this. It would have been infuriating. I want to be clear, This is nothing like my 4th and 5th grade bully. These people have been warring with one another. They've lost their husbands or their fathers, their sons, their children, their wives to one another. They've been warring with one another. And this king who's rising is now seeking refuge and finding it with the enemy, the one that have killed our people. And David is the one to be doing this? The man after God's own heart? It seems like he would know best not to go there. Might as well go into the sea rather than find refuge with the Philistines. The man after God's own heart. But this story gets even more wild. Not only does he seek refuge with the Philistines, David lives with a Philistine king, Achish, which is absolutely bonkers. I feel like you guys aren't really understanding how crazy this is, but hopefully you can come along with me as this is just wild. Then in verse 5, David asked King Achish if he could have a city to dwell in with his men. David, the man after God's own heart, the good guy, the perfect one, the dude who's the dude who can write poetry and sing songs and can kill lions and giant people, is the perfect one for Israel, is now dwelling with the bad guys, the enemy, the evil ones. Not only dwelling, but he's with the king. And then it goes on that the king then gives him a city within Philistine territory. He has his own city now with the enemy. His own place to plant a garden, his own place to grow things, to build a house, to go to the market and buy food. He has a place that he can call home. He's not there forever. He's there for a year and 4 months. But this is wild. The Philistines are the bad guys. When I came across this challenged the narrative that I'd been told. Or had I just grown to believe about the Philistines. The Philistines were the character in the Old Testament that no matter what they did, I knew that I could count it as bad. If I saw the Philistine did something, I knew that it would be bad. Just like Jimmy. When Jimmy did something, I knew it would be bad because it was Jimmy. But perhaps they are a people with their own complex backstory. Perhaps there's something else going on with the story of the Philistines, because they shouldn't be harboring David and his men, 600 men, 600 warriors. They are the enemy, but maybe they have something going on for themselves. Maybe they have their own story. Over the 2 years I had class with Jimmy, he grew into not being human to me anymore. He was the enemy, the jerk, and anything he did was wrong and evil. It didn't matter what actually happened or his intentions. And I think that is maybe a similar place that the Israelites found themselves with the Philistines. It didn't matter what they did, it was wrong. But this story makes me think, what if God is still at work in the lives of our enemies? Now, to be honest with you guys, I don't always like that thought. It's sometimes uncomfy to think God is also active in the lives of our enemies, or the people you just don't like, or the person that cut you off on the way to church, or the one who doesn't vote like you. If somebody would have told 9-year-old Mark that God is at work in the life of Jimmy, I would have laughed in your face and not let you use my calculator watch. There is no way God could be at work in the lives of my enemy. Jesus, He ended up giving a tangible example of this. He lived out God's heart. Maybe there's something at work in the lives of those we don't like. I believe living where we live in the year that we do, we lose some of the oomph of the words and actions of Jesus. So if you guys are familiar with the story of the Good Samaritan, there's a man walking down the road and he gets attacked by robbers, and then he's left there. And then a few people walk by, people that you would expect to help. A religious leader, a priest comes by, doesn't help. Another person that you would think would help, doesn't help, keeps moving. And then there's Samaritan. And at the time, they viewed these Samaritans as like a half-breed almost, something that was dirty, gross. You wouldn't want any association, so much so that you would go way out of your way to avoid their town, is how much you didn't like them. But the Samaritan stops. Even the term Good Samaritan in that story is provocative. But that person stopped and helped. And I was trying to think, okay, what is the modern day example of this? Because I think we lose some of the oomph of the words of Jesus. And I was thinking, think of yourself and you're driving and your car breaks down and you're needing help. Maybe you're injured, maybe you're just stranded. And you're on the side of the road waving down any car that may stop for you. And then all of a sudden you get excited because you notice Josh's car is driving towards you, or Becca's car, or that person in church that you think they will stop, and you're waving them down, and they just wave at you as they drive by. And then there's that janky car with the bumper sticker that really irks you, that just doesn't make sense because the person doesn't think for themselves, and you think, I don't want them to stop for me, actually. They can just keep on going, but they pull over. They help, they pay for your car to get towed back to your house. They make sure you're safe back at your home. That's uncomfy. That's very uncomfy. I believe there are a lot of similarities in these two stories. There's the people that you think are good, doing something that almost looks bad, and the people you think are bad doing something that looks good and is good. It kind of flips things on its head. And that is something that I love about Scripture, is that it invites us to say, what's weird about this story? What is this story teaching me? There's wisdom underneath these stories. It's inviting us to stop and think. Really stop. Put the Bible down and just think of what's going on. Why would the Philistines be harboring David? Why would David seek refuge with the Philistines? What is being said? I believe this story is a faint nod towards the man of Jesus. I think we see it come into fruition in these words of Jesus from Matthew chapter 5. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. I had the same teacher from 4th and 5th grade. He ended up following the class with us, and his name was Mr. Savage, which is a pretty cool name. Mr. Savage, in my opinion, really lived out these two verses. Jimmy had been in our class for a few months at this time, and there was a day that he wasn't there. It wasn't a weird thing. He must have been sick or stayed home, I'm not sure. But our teacher ended up calling us together for a class meeting. And I remember we all got our chairs and we put them in a big circle. And I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be good. We're going to talk smack about Jimmy. And I got a list. And I am stoked for it. I'm going to say all the things that he did wrong. But our teacher prompted us by writing on the whiteboard, how could we welcome Jimmy? I remember thinking, dadgummit, that's not what I want. I don't want to think about how to welcome Jimmy. I want Jimmy to disappear. But he asked us, how can we welcome him? And he let us talk as students. He just opened it to us. He didn't give his ideas. He let us have the discussion. And kids said this, oh, we should throw a party for him. We should write him letters. We should decorate his desk. We should do all these different things. And I remember I was just silent because I didn't want Jimmy to feel welcome. I wanted him to go. When you slowly villainize someone over the years, it becomes increasingly more difficult to break that down when you want to. Especially when there's a gap between you and that person. Whether it be physical distance, a family member that you quarreled with, but they live hundreds of miles away, so you never have to face that. Or a friend that moved, or someone you just don't see anymore because of the quarreling. It's easy when there's a gap created between you and that person that we fill that gap with stories, something that I hear Pastor Becca talk about often. And I find in myself often. When there's a gap between myself and somebody who I may not get along with or see eye to eye with, I fill that gap with stories about why they haven't reached out to me, why I haven't seen them, why they haven't shown up for X, Y, and Z. It's because they hate me. It's because blank. It's because they did this. It's because whatever. From my perspective, Jimmy did all the mean things he did because he wanted to. There was no other reason. It's just because he wanted to. There wasn't an excuse or reason for any of it. And it wasn't until later that I found out his home life was really, really rough. So rough, I don't want to mention it from stage here. This doesn't excuse his actions or words, but it definitely helped give perspective. Growing up in a painful home life, one or work or wherever, when something's difficult, we try to grasp for control where we can get it. And for Jimmy, it was at school. That's where he could get control. And as someone who's followed Jesus for a long time, I've created loopholes to certain passages as to why or how they don't apply to me. Well, I can't do that because I'm only X years old. Well, I can't do that because X, Y, or Z. For this one, I have found some great loopholes for why Jimmy didn't apply. It was the enemies on paper. It was the enemies that people use as an example. If they gave me a specific example, then I can't do it. But if they don't say it, then I don't have to love them because they didn't explicitly say it. The ones who on paper look different, the ones who just voted differently, those are the ones I have to love. Just the bad driver on the road, the one that cut me off in the shopping line. But it wasn't the ones that caused me pain many times. Those ones I didn't have to love. Not the ones who laughed at my pain. They were excused from my love. Not the ones who were relentlessly rude and inconsiderate. I allowed myself some freebies of who I didn't have to love. And the people who kept reoccurring pain, I could push to the side and say I didn't have to for them. I don't think Jesus had that person in mind for how awful of the thing they did. About a month ago, God started to work something in me to be really vulnerable with you all. I'm not ready nor wanting to do. There was a season in my life that was really difficult and painful, and someone close contributed to that pain. As time has eclipsed, they got transformed into that person that caused all of the pain. They were the scapegoat for a whole difficult season of my life. I had finished a book not too long ago called Unconditional by Brian Zond. In this book, he had this quote: "It is forgiveness alone that has the capacity to break the chains of injustice and give us the possibility of a new future. a future unchained from the past and free from bitterness. The world of resentment and bitterness is a small, ever-shrinking world. It is a world of ever-diminishing possibilities. It is a world on a trajectory of collapse into the singularity of resentment. As I said about a month ago, I believe God started to work something in me, that this person who caused that pain, I felt the tugging of God saying, it's time to start that process. Just start it. Nothing crazy, just start that process of loving that person. But that loophole allowed me to forgive those it was easy to forgive, not this person. But Jesus ushered in something different. And it's radical and challenging. There are no loopholes in Jesus' love. There's no way we can work around why someone is not worthy of it. There's no sneaky way we can work our way out of loving someone. I believe one of the ways we can do this is from the wisdom of 1 Samuel. It's just to ask ourselves, what if God is working in the hearts of those we passionately dislike? Or the ones we've written off? What if the person we demise is also actively seeking Jesus? I don't like that thought. What if we lead with curiosity instead of judgment? What if we start asking questions instead of assuming? I've often thought about my 4th and 5th grade teacher, Mr. Savage. His approach to this class bully was wise and far beyond my understanding at the time. I was angry with his approach. His reaction was to bring the whole class together to find a way to love Jimmy. I don't know if Mr. Savage followed or loved Jesus, but he sure did show the characteristics of Jesus. I do want to be clear. Loving someone doesn't always mean letting that person back in your life. Sometimes for our own safety, we need to keep people at a distance. But I want to just poke and prod and maybe just present something that we can start really, really small. Maybe even not calling them an enemy. Maybe it's just thinking that they are also created in the image of God. Maybe that's the starting point. Maybe thinking they are also loved by God. I want us to ask ourselves, in ending here, I want us to ask ourselves, what is God calling me to do in relationship to my enemies? This story in 1 Samuel 27 is a wild story with a narrative that doesn't make sense. The hero, the good guy, is finding safety with the enemy. But I think it's inviting us to ask ourselves, what is going on in the lives of my enemy? What's taking place in their hearts? As I said, maybe we just need to start small. Take a baby step. Personally, what I'm trying to do, is when I think of that person, I try to change the narrative that I'm telling myself. That they did X, Y, and Z because blank. But to lead with, maybe they didn't know. Maybe they had something going on in their life as well. Maybe that wasn't their intentions. I believe this story and the person of Jesus in the New Testament and God in his fullness is inviting us to think of our enemies differently, to change that narrative, to lead with love and to love differently. Let me pray. Lord, you are beyond my own limits of how I view you. And the fact in that you are active in the lives of my enemies, you are active in the ones that cause us pain, and you love them equally as much. Lord, teach us that. Teach us to love those who cause us pain. Teach us to love the ones that are difficult to love. Lord, thank you for this story in 1 Samuel. Thank you of the story of something that causes us to stop and think. Same with the story of the Good Samaritan. Lord, you are active, you are here, you are moving in our own lives and in the lives of those around us. Thank you, Lord. In your name, amen. My friends, you are dismissed. Have a wonderful Sunday.